Mark Lewis, as far as horror villains go, is an interesting one exactly because of his more stagey characteristics. He moves through Peeping Tom, clutching his various cameras as if they were tools used by a supervillain. And though he registers as such to us, those who live amongst him never notice the ominousness of it all until it's too late. The metaphor of the film is simple and obvious, but it also works in such a direct way, the simplicity of it being amplified by the film's claustrophobia. Dark attics, tight alleys, cramped studios constructed to seem larger than what they are. The artificiality created by the fictional filmmakers is not that much different from the artificiality directors Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger were known for at the time, and have been celebrated for ever since. Mark Lewis captures his subjects, doing so with a loving lens, but rather than the love for them being that of one human being to another, his form of love is much more ominous than that, much more voyeuristic, much more dangerous. His form of love is the kind seen between an artist and that which he or she captures. In the case of film, as with the case of still photography, that which is created is necessarily that which is captured, as outside of animation and special effects, film is a medium which creates by watching, and creates by recording. Rather than painting art into life or writing it into existence, filmmakers hope to use the subjects of their lens eye the same way a painter uses a brush or a writer uses words and syntax. This creates a relationship between he who captures and she who is captured, which is almost necessarily predatory. I use gender language in this case because it's what fits the film, not just its plot, but also more abstractly, the themes it aims to tackle. That is, the inherent sexuality, or at least the very clear process of domination, inherent in the act of recording. The cliche of the natives fearing the camera because they feared it catching and trapping their soul is as relevant here as it is to any other example in film I can think of. Mark's need to chase, corner, trap, and extinguish his victims is ultimately the case of a metaphor being pushed to its logical conclusion. Mark already does all these things, even without his secret hobby of murder, as the act of filming is the act of imprisonment already. To film someone is to imprison their image, keeping it hostage, yours to use and yours to enjoy. The film and photographs hanging in Mark's dark room might as well be hostages, silent only because muffled, waiting for their kidnapper to come back home, existing entirely at his mercy. The film is rife with these obvious parallels. The artistry and technical know-how of Mark mirroring his artistry and craft as a murderer with such direct one-to-oneness that the film almost becomes a masterclass in character as metaphor, while still leaving the realism of the character, at least in the context of the film he inhabits, untarnished. This circles back to the point I was making about his camera. Mark carries his device around with him the same way slasher villains carry their iconic weapons. It's Blondie's pistol, Sanjuro's sword. This would be true even without the added element of his extended tripod blade, which, again, is only an extension of the obvious metaphor. Mark's need to capture beauty in its moment of death perfectly resembles the obsession of the artist with capturing that which needs to be expressed in its most perfect form, and ensuring that that perfection remains beyond any possibility of perishing. If Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus could only know how little of their work would survive the years, the tone of their famous tragedies would only be that much more tragic, as it would be under this condition that they would truly know the futility of it all. Mark's amorality, which only manifests itself in relation to his artistic pursuit, is the most pure example I know of an artist putting art before common social morality in all of fiction. He violates mores and the rights of human beings because his art exists on a higher plane. That which is idealized, being perfect, must necessarily contain a life more important than our own, which only ever periodically runs its desperate fingers against perfection's flank. By capturing us in this perfection, this platonic form of being, Mark becomes a hero to all artists, just at the exact moment that he becomes an enemy to all of humanity. The fact that the two impulses stretch so strongly in opposing directions is exactly the irony Michael Powell, as a great artist himself, was trying to capture. Society apparently wasn't ready for it at the time. The fact that the film is universally celebrated today is either a testament to us maturing to the point of accepting this irony, or to the extent of our delusion, which accepts the irony while denying the gravity of its implications.